What if I told you that buried within the history of human civilization lies a science so mysterious, so powerful, that it has been both feared and revered for thousands of years? A science that whispers of hidden transformations, of turning lead into gold, of discovering eternal life, and of unlocking the deepest secrets of the soul. You've probably heard the word before, alchemy. For many, it conjures images of dusty laboratories, strange potions, and eccentric figures scribbling on parchment. But the true story of alchemy is far stranger and far more profound than the myths suggest. It is not just about metals or magic. It is about the forgotten architecture of transformation itself. To understand alchemy, we have to peel back layers of time. The roots of alchemy stretch back to ancient Egypt, where it was closely tied to spiritual practices, sacred rituals, and the mysteries of life after death. The Egyptians believed that metals, like people, were alive, growing and evolving inside the earth. Gold was seen as the most perfect metal, the earthly reflection of the sun, the immortal body of the gods. To create gold, then, was not simply about wealth. It was about participating in a divine act, completing nature's unfinished work. When Greek philosophy blended with Egyptian thought in the city of Alexandria, alchemy took on a new form. Thinkers like Hermes Trismegistus, half god, half philosopher in legend, became the guiding figure of a tradition that would echo through centuries. His writings spoke of the unity of all things, the hidden correspondences between the heavens and the earth, the body and the soul. As above, so below became the alchemical mantra, a recognition that the transformations of matter reflect transformations of spirit. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, and alchemy was practiced across the Islamic world and Christian Europe, in guarded secrecy. Alchemists became figures both respected and ridiculed, some seen as charlatans chasing riches, others revered as sages searching for wisdom. The philosopher's stone became the ultimate symbol, not just a literal object that could transmute base metals into gold, but a metaphor for the highest achievement of the human soul. To find the stone was to achieve illumination, to unite the mortal with the divine, to discover the secret spark of immortality hidden within all life. But alchemy was never just about material transformation. The texts, filled with strange symbols, allegories, and riddles, were designed to conceal as much as they revealed. They spoke of suns and moons, of marriages and deaths, of dragons and birds, all coded languages for processes happening both in the laboratory and in the depths of the human psyche. To heat, dissolve, and recombine matter was to mirror the transformation of the self, to burn away impurities, to dissolve the ego, to refine the spirit into its purest essence. And here lies the forgotten truth. Alchemy is as much a science of the inner world as it is of the outer. Modern chemistry, in fact, grew directly out of alchemy. The glassware we use in labs today, flasks, alembics, crucibles, all trace their lineage back to the alchemist's workshop. But as science advanced, it discarded the symbolic, the spiritual, the mysterious. It reduced alchemy to superstition, ignoring that behind its strange language was a map of human transformation, a blueprint for uniting matter and meaning. Why does this matter now? Because the forgotten science of alchemy speaks to something we still crave today. We may no longer believe in turning lead into gold, but we long to transform ourselves, to find meaning, to discover a higher purpose in the chaos of life. Alchemy is the story of transformation itself, of how the ordinary can become extraordinary, how darkness can be refined into light, how mortality can hint at immortality. Imagine this: an alchemist in a dimly lit chamber, surrounded by ancient manuscripts and flickering candles. He stirs a bubbling mixture, watching intently as vapors rise and swirl. But what he's really studying is not the substance in the flask, it's himself. Each experiment is a meditation, each failure a lesson, each success a glimpse of something eternal. This is not primitive chemistry. It is a symbolic ritual, a merging of science, philosophy, and spirituality into one grand quest. And perhaps this is why alchemy was hidden, why it was called the royal art or the great work. To practice alchemy was to touch dangerous truths, to seek knowledge that could easily be corrupted if placed in the wrong hands. For those who sought only power or wealth, the path ended in frustration. For those who sought wisdom, it became a path to transcendence. Today, when we hear of alchemy, we might laugh it off as a failed attempt at science, but if we look closer, we see that it holds a mirror to our own lives. We too are alchemists, trying to transmute our struggles into strength, our pain into wisdom, our ordinary days into moments of gold. The forgotten science of alchemy is not gone. It is waiting for us to remember that transformation is the essence of being alive. As alchemy moved into the Middle Ages, it became a bridge between science, philosophy, and mysticism. While kings and rulers were often fascinated by the promise of creating gold, the true alchemists were less interested in wealth and more devoted to uncovering hidden knowledge. In the Islamic Golden Age, alchemists like Jabir ibn Hayyan, known in the West as Geber, advanced the field through careful experiments with acids, distillation, and crystallization. His works describe not just physical processes, but also symbolic meanings that tied chemical change to spiritual growth. To Jabir, transforming base metals into gold was not merely about chemistry. It was a metaphor for purifying the human soul. Meanwhile, in Europe, alchemy spread quietly, often practiced in secrecy to avoid persecution. The Church viewed alchemy with suspicion, seeing it as a dangerous attempt to play God. Yet at the same time, monasteries preserved alchemical texts, and many priests studied them in secret. These paradoxes only added to the mystery of alchemy, making it appear even more like forbidden knowledge, accessible only to those who dared to seek it. By the Renaissance, alchemy had woven itself into the heart of European thought. Artists, scientists, and philosophers alike drew from its symbols and practices. Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks are filled with alchemical references, blending art, mechanics, and natural philosophy. Isaac Newton, the father of modern physics, wrote more about alchemy than about mathematics or optics. For him, the hidden forces behind matter were not separate from the divine. Studying alchemy was a way to understand the mind of God. This is a part of alchemy's story that is often erased. Some of the greatest scientific minds of history were alchemists at heart. They saw no contradiction between the physical and the spiritual. For them, the laboratory was a sacred space, and every experiment was both science and prayer. The philosopher's stone, in their view, was not only the key to turning lead into gold, but also a symbol of achieving wisdom and unity with the divine. And yet, alchemy was not just a science of the elite. Its imagery seeped into art, literature, and even everyday life. Alchemical symbols of the sun and moon, the marriage of opposites, the death and rebirth of matter, were echoed in fairy tales and folklore. Dragons guarding treasure, heroes undergoing trials, and magical transformations all mirrored the alchemist's journey. Alchemy was not confined to the laboratory. It was a world view, a way of seeing the world as alive with hidden correspondences and sacred meaning. But as the centuries passed, the rise of modern science began to strip away the mystical side of alchemy. Chemistry emerged from its shadow, focusing on measurable reactions, repeatable experiments, and practical applications. The spiritual and symbolic dimensions of alchemy were dismissed as superstition, as the work of charlatans or dreamers. By the 18th century, the word alchemy itself became almost synonymous with fraud. The alchemist was seen as a fool who believed he could make gold, rather than a seeker of wisdom who understood the deeper metaphors of transformation. Yet the truth is more complex. The forgotten science of alchemy was never just about physical metals. It was about the transmutation of the self. The stages of alchemy, the blackening, whitening, reddening, were not simply chemical processes but psychological states, maps of inner transformation. In many ways, alchemy anticipated the discoveries of modern psychology. Carl Jung, the great depth psychologist, argued that the strange symbols of alchemy were projections of the unconscious, images of the soul's journey toward wholeness. To him, the alchemical texts were not nonsense, but a symbolic language of the psyche. And this is where the story of alchemy becomes especially fascinating. For even though science abandoned it, alchemy refused to die. It survived in secret societies like the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons, who preserved its imagery and teachings as part of their spiritual traditions. It lived on in art and literature, in the hidden meanings of Shakespeare's plays, in the paintings of Hieronymus Bosch, and in the works of poets who saw the world itself as an alchemical crucible. What is striking is that alchemy has always been about more than formulas or experiments. It is about the human longing for transformation, for turning the lead of ordinary life into the gold of enlightenment, wisdom, and immortality. And even today, in an age dominated by technology and rationalism, this longing has not disappeared. In fact, one could argue that it is stronger than ever. Because beneath all the progress, we still search for meaning. We still yearn to refine ourselves, to purify what is base, to unlock what is hidden. The forgotten science of alchemy speaks directly to this desire. It tells us that the gold we seek is not only in the world, it is within us. That the true philosopher's stone is not an object, but a state of being. And that transformation, though mysterious and often difficult, is the essence of life itself. Alchemy has always lived in the space between worlds, the physical and the spiritual, the scientific and the symbolic. And though modern science tried to erase it, alchemy's legacy has never truly disappeared. Instead, it slipped into the hidden corners of culture, philosophy, and even psychology, waiting for those curious enough to rediscover it. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists of the 20th century, was among those who brought alchemy back into serious conversation. While many dismissed alchemical texts as confusing nonsense, Jung saw something deeper, a symbolic map of the unconscious. When alchemists wrote about burning, dissolving, or recombining metals, Jung believed they were also describing the inner processes of transformation within the human mind. He argued that the strange imagery of dragons, kings, queens, suns, and moons was not random but archetypal, symbols emerging from the collective unconscious, shared across cultures and time. For Jung, the philosopher's stone was not a physical object, but the symbol of psychological wholeness, what he called individuation. This was the process of integrating the shadow and the light, the conscious and the unconscious, the mortal and the divine within ourselves. In this way, alchemy became a mirror of the human soul, describing in metaphor what we today call psychological growth. Jung even admitted that studying alchemy gave him the language to better understand his own patients, dreams, and fantasies. This reinterpretation breathes new life into alchemy. It shows us that its forgotten science was not merely about failed experiments to make gold, but about describing inner change in a coded language. The laboratory was also a symbol of the heart and mind, where fire and water, dissolution and recombination symbolize the human journey through destruction, renewal and rebirth. Yet even beyond psychology, alchemy's influence is everywhere. In literature, its symbols are woven into some of the most enduring stories ever told. Shakespeare filled his plays with alchemical references, the transformation of characters, the death and rebirth themes, the symbolic marriages, all mirror alchemical processes. In the 20th century, writers like Paulo Coelho revived the idea of the alchemical quest in works such as The Alchemist, using it as a metaphor for finding one's true self and destiny. Alchemy also left its mark on secret societies and esoteric traditions. The Rosicrucians, who emerged in the 17th century, drew heavily from alchemical imagery to represent spiritual transformation. The Freemasons too encoded alchemical symbols into their rituals, linking the physical process of building with the inner process of refinement. In these traditions, alchemy became less about material gold and more about the gold of the spirit, wisdom, enlightenment, and inner strength. What is especially striking is how modern science, after centuries of dismissing alchemy, is slowly circling back to some of its core ideas. Quantum physics, with its paradoxes and mysteries, often sounds strangely alchemical. The notion that matter and energy are deeply interconnected, that observation can influence reality, or that the universe itself is built on hidden correspondences. These echo the alchemical worldview of a cosmos, alive with meaning and unity. So why does alchemy still matter today? Because the essence of its message is timeless. Transformation is the key to existence. Just as base metals can be refined into something precious, so too can human beings refine themselves. In a world filled with distraction, chaos, and division, alchemy reminds us that the real treasure is not outside, but within. It is the process of growth, the art of taking what is raw and imperfect in ourselves and shaping it into something luminous. Think of the struggles we face: loss, failure, heartbreak, uncertainty. In alchemical terms, These are the stages of nigredo, the blackening, where old structures collapse. But this stage is not the end, it is the beginning. Out of the blackening comes albedo, the whitening, a purification where new clarity emerges. And finally, rubedo, the reddening, the stage of completion where the new self is born stronger and more whole. These stages are not just chemistry. They are the human story, repeated again and again in each of our lives. Perhaps this is why the forgotten science of alchemy continues to captivate us. It speaks to our deepest desire to believe that nothing is wasted, that even our darkest times can be transformed into light. It tells us that the ordinary is not ordinary at all. It is raw material for greatness, and it whispers a radical truth, that within every human being lies the spark of the divine, waiting to be uncovered. So when we hear stories of alchemists searching for gold or immortality, we should not dismiss them as foolish myths. We should recognize them as allegories of the human condition, because in the end we are all alchemists. Every challenge we endure, every lesson we learn, every transformation we undergo is a step in our own great work, the inner alchemy of becoming fully alive. And maybe, just maybe, this is the real philosopher's stone. Not a stone at all, but a truth that through transformation, we can discover the hidden gold that has been within us all along.